No more coasters, no more tea towels, no more favourite words, no more individual best words ever. It's a language, so it exists in sentences and stories.
I want you to maintain that level of excitement throughout the entire event. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival, coming to you from the Edinburgh College of Art, where we are generously hosted by the University of Edinburgh. I'm Heather Parry, and today I'm really excited to speak to two of Scotland's most exciting authors. And as you know, they are very exciting. To my left, Ely Percy is a Scottish writer who grew up in Renfrew. Their first publication was a letter-cum poem in Big magazine in 1994, which gives ages away a little bit. Since then, they've released a memoir, graduated with distinction from Glasgow University's MPhil with creative writing, and contributed over 50 short stories to literary journals. Their debut novel, Vicky Romeo plus Jules, was published by Knight Errant Press in 2019, which feels like a lifetime ago. And their second novel, Duck Feet, came out via Monstrous Regiment in March 2021. To their left, Harry Josephine Giles is from Orkney and lives in Leith. Her first novel, Deep Wheel Orcadia, is coming out with Picador in October 2021. And I do have the cover exclusive to this event, very high-tech cover design. She has a PhD in creative writing from Stirling, and her show Drone debuted at the 2019 Fringe and toured internationally. Let's give them a round of applause again, please. I'm sure you're all seasoned book festival attendees, but for the benefit of anyone who's new here, the event is going to run like this. We're going to have a couple of readings from our brilliant authors to give a bit of context to our conversation, and then we're going to have a little bit of a chat about it. And then at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for audience questions, which are going to be a mix of questions from you guys here in the live audience and questions from you guys at home. Hello, online audience. It's lovely to have you. First, we're going to get a taste of these fantastic books. Ely, we're going to start with you, but do you want to give us a little rundown of what Duck Feet is all about?
Yeah, Duck Feet is a coming-of-age novel written entirely in Scots, set in Renfrew, and it's about a young working-class schoolgirl, Kirsty Campbell, as she goes through first to sixth year of high school, and we see her and her friends dealing with different issues such as bullying, drugs, coming out, teenage pregnancy.
And are you going to read from the beginning?
Yeah, just the opening.
Perfect.
So this first chapter is also called Duck Feet. My dad's got bad feet. He says it's because when he was wee, his mother made him wear shoes that didn't fit him. She made him squash his feet into shoes that used to be his brother's because she couldn't afford to buy new ones for the both of them. He's got curly toes now because of it. They're all twisted around on top of each other. Look, the pleats my ma puts in my hair. You can see all the big blue veins in his feet, as if somebody's drew them on with a felt-tip pen. He can't bend his toes right, and he has to wear steel toe caps to work in case anyone stands in them. Our school's going to be starting swimming lessons soon, and I can't wait. I can't swim yet, so I asked my dad if he'd take me to the bath to let me practice. He said no. I said, how no? He says, because I can't bloody swim, that's how no. I said, aye, but you don't need to be able to swim to go in the pool. He didn't say much afterwards. He just pointed at his toes and said, if you were me, would you want to show our feet like that? The swimming bath was pish. They put me down at the shallow end with this pure midnight boy called Colin for 1E that looks like he's never had a bath in his life. And this lassie called Harpreet that wears a mad swimming cap because it's against her religion to get her hair wet. I get made to wear these big stupid yellow armbands and all the boys in my class laughed at me. All my pals were up at the 7-foot mark, doing lengths and diving for rubber hula hoops. I said to my dad, how do you know go to see a chiropodist? A chiropodist, he said. What would I want with a chiropodist? I said, maybe he could help fix your feet. You'd be able to take me swimming. My dad just laughed at me though, and then he said, a chiropodist would take one look at these feet, chop the bloody things off. I only says it to him because, see my wee sister, she'd bad feet when she was away and she managed to get her feet fixed. This guy in the Start Right shoe shop, he fitted her with the wrong size of shoe and she ended up with toes all up and down like Guruk. It was all because she'd wee skinny ankles and big broad feet and he packed her toes into wee narrow shoes. Mama knew something wasn't right about these shoes because for a whole week after she bought them, my sister wouldn't stop gurning. She kept pulling the shoes off and flinging them out of the pram. We were coming back for the Sunday school one morning and this guy chased after us because he flung one shoe at the top of Ard Road and the other halfway down Venaker. When my ma took the shoes off my sister that night, her feet were all red raw and they're covered in blisters and her wee toes were all twisting together like a corkscrew. My dad took the shoes back to the shop the next day, but I've never seen him that angry. I thought he was going to punch the guy's lights out. My sister was lucky that her bones hadn't set properly. The chiropodist managed to gear these wee things for in between her toes. They were like braces made of plasticine stuff, and they looked a wee bit like the jelly falls teeth you used to get after the ice cream van. The chiropodist was dead nice, and he made me a bouncy ball out of plasticine stuff for me to play with when I was sitting in the waiting room. There was deep sea divers in the baths today. I swam half a breadth and then I stopped at the edge of the pool to watch them. They had snorkels and oxygen tanks and everything. One of them had a pair of green flippers. She was putting them on. Somebody fell up the deep end shout it, "Head up, feet." Then everybody else started laughing. Then Chris Rice from our Reggie class shouted at me, "Hey, how'd you not get a pair of duck feet to go with your wings?" That was what gave me the idea. "Aye, but how no?" I said. My dad said, "No." I said, "But how no?" My dad said, "No," and that's it, finished. I said, "But I asked about it and everything, and the guy said it was all right." My dad says, "The answer's no, I'm telling you," and that's the end of the story. My dad's never paddled in the sea or walked along the beach and felt the sand between his toes. He's never took his shoes off on a hot day and run barefoot across a scorching hot pavement. He doesn't know how it feels to have athlete's foot or a verruca, and he doesn't understand the pleasure of watching the dead skin peel away from the backs of your heels. I just thought if he wore a pair of flippers in the baths, then he wouldn't have to worry about folks seeing his bad feet, then he'd be able to take me swimming. It wasn't like I was being funny, I was being totally serious about it, although I did have some job convincing the lifeguards.
Thank you so much. I think that gives the real sense of the energy and the humour of the book and the warmth between the characters as well, so thank you. Josie, would you like to give us a little brief introduction to the concept of Deep Wheel Orcadia before you read?
Sure. So Deep Wheel Orcadia is an Orkney language science fiction verse novel, that well-known genre. It's set in a space station a few hundred years in the future, and it's a space station that's almost but not entirely unlike contemporary Orkney. And it tells the story of a couple of folk that are visiting or returning to the space station. There are two central characters, Astrid, who was born there and has returned after going to art school on Mars, which is where you go, and Darling, who's visiting there for the first time. And I was going to do the first poem from it because it kind of sets the scene a bit. And I'm being very generous to you, and I'm going to give you some English translations behind me, which maybe we'll talk about later. But the book comes with a sort of parallel translation into English. So this is that version. Astrid docks. The chime of the tannoy is what tacks her back, for it is not changed. No more is the words summoning her to the airlock. Her words, that she has not heard for 8 good year. She watched the deep wheel approach, grey-green, its central station turling yet and ant the yellow yachting. Piri bolus tedder round its ring. Pierheads trang with yawls, with glims, and found the gloop between out by and in close and slack. But only now, with a soon, does she ken where she is. She looks around the other folk, trying to mind wha's unkin and wha's bairn and wha's gin a name for she left and wha's name she should mind yet. And Astrid looks to another body, standing at the busy screen, tall, pale, red hair, rafsy, Martian style, gaping at the sight. She could be a student for college, but not like Astrid that wants to watch her and kind of does know. She's fearful bonny and word-like for Mars, but here at the ramp's poly habitat, so in her space, she's an awful query soul. The visitor looks around and grins at Astrid. It looks away, no kenning what way to meet and come and joy. The chars o' the transport happen, a gant thrumming the bones o' the ship accord when the gangway connects. Astrid's teen the peedy and whitey life on her back, and when she steps into the airlock, she catches the grief for what will come if the perts were kind of fund their pace.
Thank you so much. Up to you. You can do another if you'd like.
Yeah, we've got another. So the second one I wanted to do was from about a third of the way through the book, because obviously this pair meet and fall for each other because it's a romance. Why not? And this is a poem. Astrid takes Darling home for dinner. Astrid takes Darling home for dinner, and I wanted to do this one because it's kind of about this collision of languages and what happens in that collision of languages. So they've met and they're getting on fairly well, and she's Darling's come in to meet Astrid's parents. This is my new friend, and the layers in friend is not fairly clear, and will no be explained. Darling is winsome now. She's something other as the scar thing o' a tourist Astrid met. A smile in her fun-tackled face, Rory Clay's. In the midst of this family, it's like her body's lowing. Maybe the thought of parents learnt at performance. With Darling's silence about her own feathers, Astrid's hour thankful for Inga and Ivan's mate and kindness, until, fair into the meal, she hears their vowels rounding, their consonants clipping, their words switching to marry Darling's own, and gets unspeakable burning. And when her own in is one, she sits quiet, wanting the body to notice, her mother to smile and say, "Bado," and take her back to the old family table. But the heart of Astrid's silence is awful gravity. And so the conversation is fag and fan, as hearing itself is less and less real getting, till it's just Darling that's smiling and speaking yet.
Thank you so much. I was mastering technology at the same time, so honestly. As you can imagine, there's so much in these books, and I'm sure you guys will have like a million questions at the end. Our online audience can ask questions at any time through the Q&A function in the chat, and through technology, they will come to us on the stage. Amazing, I know, we live in the 21st century. In the meantime, though, I'm going to start with you, Eli. As you mentioned, Renfrew is set, Dugford is set in Renfrew, where you're from.
Yep.
To a lot of people, I think they feel like writing about your hometown is the most natural thing in the world. But for me, that feels quite intimidating as a thing. Do you feel the weight of representation on you when you write where you're from, or do you find it to be a very natural thing?
Do you know what? I did worry that people for Renfrew weren't going to like it. I mean, back when I was first writing it as short stories, I'd given some to my sister, and she said she really enjoyed them. And then I found out when I was in the pub one night that they'd been around all her pals at school. And I was like, what? You know, so I did know that there were some people who liked them, but whether that was just a select few people, you just don't know. But I'm really, really pleased to say that I'm getting lots of folk from Renfrew who I don't know are like messaging me, Instagram, Facebook, trying to add me as a pal. You know, like, oh, you know my sister's brothers, and I'm like, I don't actually know you. You know, no, people have been like, oh, I know that. I used to go to the Vicky Bath. So I'm really, really pleased that folk are like saying that their experience of living in Renfrew, and I've got a lot of people's like mums and stuff like that. Like folks saying I gave it to my mum, and she's 65, and she said that was just like when she went to school, and I was like, oh, that's really, really good, because it just shows that it has sort of like, you know, it's resonated with people of different ages. I don't know about the teenagers, because I don't really know many teenagers. A couple of people have said that their teenagers read it and hasn't mentioned anything, so that could be good or that could be bad.
They let you know if you got it wrong.
So I don't know.
You mentioned there actually that this didn't come about, it wasn't always a novel, was it? Do you want to tell us how Duck Feet came about?
The first short story that I ever wrote, well, the first Duck Feet story that I wrote, I was just finishing up uni and I had spent like 2 years of my life writing Vicky Romeo plus Jules, and I thought I'd really like to just write some short stories, and I hadn't really done many short stories at that point. I thought, okay, I'm gonna crack this. I'm gonna find out how do you write a good short story. So there was a call out in Ms. Lexia magazine for new writing, and the theme was shoes. So I was just like, all right, I'm sitting in my mum and dad's house, I still stayed at home, and I'm like, right, do you know what? In order for this to be like taken, if they want my story, it can't just be good, it has to be different from everybody else's, because I know they'd said in the past, when we had the one on blood, everybody wrote about periods. And I was just like, so what would people not write about? I'm writing down shoes, brogues, high heels, trainers, what other kind of shoes can you get, sandals, all the rest of it. And my dad came in, I need a basin of water, and he just came in from work. Now my dad's got bad feet. And I just wrote that down. And then this just, I don't know, it's never happened to me like that before, and it's never really happened since with anything else other than Duck Feet. And Kirsty's voice, it was as if I just heard her, and I just started writing it down, finished the story, typed it up the next day, sent it away, then thought, okay, I'll do another one. Wrote the next story, sat in the French class, and I just kept doing them. And I think I'd got into maybe about 10 or 12 of them, and that was when I thought, oh, maybe this isn't short stories.
And was it the publisher that asked you to novelise all the stories?
Yes, I think I'd been sending people to a short story collection, and a couple of people had said, oh, is it not a novel? And I was like, all right, I'll say it's an episodic novel, but it wasn't really, because it was 65 short stories that had the same narrator, but they were about different things. And I've been sending them out to places, and people liked them individually, lots of small press magazines. But when I sent out the whole manuscript, people were like, no, this is really important for Scotland, but nobody in the rest of the world's going to read it. Oh, okay. So I was like, fine. So I went around those Scottish magazines and I started sending the English ones, and I was getting a lot of misses, but I was getting people coming back saying, actually, this is really funny. And I just kept sending them out, and I thought, do you know what? 16 years passed, and I thought, I'm not going to send this out as a whole manuscript again until I've hit like 35 stories, because then that's half. And I just about got there, and then Monstrous Regiment came and said, we love your stories. Could you make them a novel? And I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't going to send it out, but so that was really good. But what they actually asked me to do was do a whole complete structural rewrite, because I had to go to the first story and start again with it.
And give it a through line.
Yeah, and give it a through line. And I was just like, it took me over a year.
That's not bad as a period to write a novel, though. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was hard work, though. The entire pandemic was me just doing that. But
Josie, you were nodding along there at the idea that work in a Scottish language isn't going to be accepted, or people maybe have told you it won't be accepted outside of Scotland. Is that something you've experienced too?
I think it's more about the telling than the actuality. That every time I've done stuff internationally in Scots in Orkney language, it's always been received really well and received with curiosity. But I think there's a nervousness and a reticence about that from publishers here. I mean, in Scotland, as much as throughout the UK, there's a sense that people aren't going to read it or aren't going to put the work in. It does take a bit of work sometimes to read a language that you're not familiar with, even if it's close. But it's more, I think, that kind of inhibition about pushing Scots forward that I recognise there, and that I have that bothers me sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we can convince people today that they're very wrong, because they are, because these two novels are really brilliant, and I hugely encourage you to read them if you haven't already. You've done the exact opposite from Ely in a lot of ways, and that you've taken us to the far reaches of space in Deep Wheel Orcadia. Can you tell us about how the concept of it came about?
I was thinking about, I was home researching Orkney language. I had a small bit of money from Creative Scotland to just do some research in Orkney language and write something, and I didn't know what it was I was going to write. And I was trying out some different things, and I was thinking about this problem that happens with minority language literature and rural minority language literature in particular, which is that there's an expectation that it's always going to be about home, and it's always going to be about the past, and it's always going to be about nostalgia, which there's fantastic work written about home and past and nostalgia, and I love it too. But it sometimes feels constraining, and it sometimes seems to be a way of keeping language in the past, or keeping language as something that's always dying, it's always going to wait. And I was thinking, well, what can I do to counter that? And then I was like, well, let's go to space. and I just had that thought, and I'm not the first person to have that thought. There's Matthew Fitt's book, Button Benagogo, is a sci-fi Scots novel that's influential on me and on others. I'm not the first person by any means. But once I'd had that thought, the whole thing just started turning, and then it was there, and I had to do it. And that was 7 years ago, I think, maybe 6.
Oh, so
and I've just been pursuing it ever since.
Oh, wow. So how did it feel, because as you mentioned, this is a verse novel. Mm-hmm. Did it feel like a natural progression from your work as a poet, or was it a whole new challenge?
Both. Both. I didn't consciously decide to write a verse novel. I just started writing one, and then I was doing it, and I thought, well, let's just keep doing that then. Which is maybe a cop-out of an answer, but it didn't occur to me that I was doing a slightly out there thing until I was kind of halfway through doing it. So that was quite nice. But I'm really interested in the thing about poetry, especially in Scots, is that it gives you kind of license to slow down in language and to work with a density and intensity of language that it's a bit harder to support in prose, especially when you're working in Scots, which is only kind of just teetering towards having an established way of writing it, having an established orthography. But especially in Orkney language, in Orkney Scots, which there's very, very little published in it. We don't ken how to write it. We don't have established ways of doing it, and it's quite hard to write kind of narrative prose. But if you slow down and work with that precision and density that poetry offers, I find that actually easier to write in. So that's kind of the why of it, I think.
So did you find it initially quite difficult to even approach writing in Orcadian? Is that what you're telling us there?
Yes and no. I mean, the sounds are always there, mm-hmm. but how to... it did take recovery, and I think... And, the way that I speak is mixed. I grew up, with two languages and with a family that were incomers to Orkney. So my own approach to it is kind of muddled in its own way, but also when you don't grow up with a literature that's in the language that you're hearing, you have to do a work of recovery to figure out how to write in it. And there isn't an established orthography for a way of spelling to write in Orcadian. So I kind of had to make up my own way of doing that. And I should say as well that there isn't just one Orkney language, that it does vary still from island to island. And the sounds, the vowels especially vary from island to island. So any way that I write it isn't going to work for everybody in Orkney, or anybody even. Mm-hmm. Maybe it just works for me, I don't know.
I love that. It's it's just such a personal thing, isn't it, language? Eli, is that something you experienced as well, writing in Scots, a kind of challenge?
I think, one of the things that my sister said to me is Kirsty doesn't sound like us. And I'm like, no, but she doesn't. She sounds slightly, a little bit different, but if you listen to the different people in Renfrew, and my accent's all muddled up now from living in England and living in Edinburgh and living in Glasgow, if you listen to different people in Renfrew, you'll hear that people speak different ways. So I try to reflect that in the characters. Chris Rice will say, a pair of water wings, or good down the stairs, and he wears stuff, where Kirsty will say wear, and Charlene will say hing and hing we and hing me, and it's just, I don't know, I'm just somebody that's got a good ear. Mm-hmm. I'm just an ordinary person that's got a good ear, and I just try and write the way that I hear things, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in my voice, just people around about me. Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that your characters are based on people you know from home?
No.
For legal purposes, we'll say no.
No, one of my friends from high school, who was one of the first readers, got a couple of chapters and she was like, Charlene Clark, that's Donna Clark, isn't it? Now, if I was going to do something based on Donna Clark, would I have picked the same surname? Don't think I would have. And then she got a bit further on, she's like, oh, here, that's nothing like Donna. She's like, who is that? And my sister's going, was that thingy that I went to Ayr College with? And I'm like, who? And she's like, you know, that I went to Ayr College with? She's just like Charlene Clark. And I'm like, now how would I know someone that you went to Ayr College with 20 odd years ago? Right enough, you'd never have met her. No, I would. But loads of people have been like saying that they felt that they knew somebody in the book, but they couldn't figure out who it was.
It's got a real, like, you know, I'm from South Yorkshire originally, and I can feel like that kind of like familiarity with it. And I wonder if it's just like when you've got people who speak in a very strong dialect, the rhythms of it give rise to like a certain humour, and then you feel, even when it's someone else's dialect, you can feel like a familiarity with it. Yeah. There's also like, there's so much humour in this book.
Yeah.
And do you think that comes out of the like beats of Scots, or is that something you very consciously put in there?
Oh, well, I used to go along to an event called Reading Aloud. When I first started doing Duck Feet, I'd just go and I'd read a short story, and people started to come up to me going like, here, what, is that Charlene man, by the way, what's she about? You know, and our people would come up and say, oh, what's happening with Harpreet, blah, blah, blah. And people would start to come up, and they wouldn't just be saying, I liked your story. That was at the beginning, and then they started to come up and say, do you know what I think should happen? And I don't think you should ever dismiss what somebody's saying, even if they're not a writer. Like, I think sometimes somebody can have a really good idea, but an idea, so I just take everything that everybody says. And so I started to like listen to what folk were saying and think, actually, if 5 people are saying this should happen, maybe it should, or maybe it absolutely should not happen. And then I started to talk to people and ask them about their school experiences to see if I was like on the right track. And I found people were just telling me the same things over and over again. Teacher you like, teacher you hate, wee person that they think smells, best pal, worst enemy. And the same things were happening to folk. And I think that's why people think that, you know, like they know somebody in the book, because it was their experiences and
the humours
like,
come from the people.
Yeah, I think so.
Stories.
I think so. Folk wanted to tell you something funny that had happened to them in school, or something funny that their mum did, or somebody that they know did.
I suppose that's how we connect, isn't it?
Yes.
We share those like funny, familiar experiences. I'm going to take a complete left turn here, Josie. You've described Deep Wheel Orcadia as a gay communist space fantasy written in a small language.
Tweet it once, and then it ends up with press releases.
That noise you can hear is people ordering the book like, across the country. I was wondering if you could speak to us a little bit about the intersection of politics and language for you, because I get the sense that they are inextricable in your work.
A bit. I mean, I could speak a bit. I kind of did do a thesis on it, so I have to pick which bit to extract. I'm having like what am I going? Yeah. So no, politics and language. One of the reasons that I'm interested in minority language in general, which is languages that are minoritized within the state, right, that they operate in, is. I suppose the forms of resistance that happens within them. And okay, here we go. I think that something that we have to understand about English is that it's a language that isn't just a language of the nation, isn't just a language of the state, but it's a language that's formed through the creation of nation states. And this is the case with most Western European languages, that they come to exist through the process of those states coming to exist. And that English is what it is because of a concentration of power in London and because of an active suppression of forms of minority within these islands, that the language gets made through. So I'm kind of interested in leaning into the diversities and the forms of minority language that still exist as a way of kind of undoing those relationships to state power and language. There you go. That's the summary of me.
That was a fantastic answer.
I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone other than me now, but there we go.
Did the idea of like exploring communism through Orcadian come from writing on Orcadian, or was it the other way around?
No, I mean, like, it's not actually that
about communism.
It's not about communism. Well, it is, but It's not really. I was so there's two things that I wanted to do, and one was a kind of exploration of complex utopias, which is I don't think she uses the word complex. It's a different one, but something that I got from Ursula Le Guin, who's a big inspiration, and particularly her book Always Coming Home, which has a constructed language in it and is a kind of future projection of her own utopian desires into a kind of agrarian community. And I have these like utopian urges as well. So I was interested in exploring those utopian urges and then also trying to unpick them. So thinking, what is it that I would want to see in a space station society 300 years in the future, and then what would the problems actually be? So I got kind of interested in that. And then I also got interested in the forms of, okay, this might upset, the forms of communism that do exist in rural societies and in island societies where there are resources, including contemporary technological resources that are collectively owned by a community, that are generating energy or money for a community, and what happens with them is decided through a form of democracy. Like these forms of futurism exist, and I don't want to call them like what Marx would call primitive communism, which I think is a silly term. They are a futurist form of society that exists in the here and now. So I got interested in some of that. But in the end, none of that is really central to the book, which is a story. It's a setting, it's a backdrop that I think is explored kind of lightly as this is the world that these characters are in, and that they're in a space station where resources are collectivized, are shared, but are also under all sorts of pressure. And they're struggling to respond to those pressures.
I suppose I should have given the rest of the quote, which was that it's a story written in a small language about, is it small joys and pleasures?
Did I? I don't know. I mean, I just tweeted it. I can't remember what I tweeted. I'll have to look it up.
You can tell I'm a cruel chair because I didn't give Josie any heads up for any of these questions. Eli, I would say that your novel is like slightly more quietly political, but kind of no less political in the way it explores like working class life in Renfrew, but also it touches on like crime and race and sexuality and things like this. Is that something that came out of just writing sort of as Kirsty and with Kirsty as your muse, or is that something you brought through when you novelised it?
When I novelised it, I really wanted to talk about intersectional feminism. Because I felt like when there were short stories, you had people like Nicola Buchanan. Now, this is a dicky lassie, by the way. The fact that she's a wheelchair user is completely beside the point. She's just not a very nice person. And I really felt that in the short stories, you weren't getting that. And I thought, how can I can only spend so much time with this wee lassie. She's a pain in the arse. But it's really important that she's there and that we see that like she is definitely not being treated the same as other kids in the school. The fact that she's horrible is beside the point. There's sometimes she makes a really good point and she's absolutely on the money, and other times she's homophobic. You know, she's nasty to other people that are marginalised. But I wanted to take that right from the beginning when I had. Also, I've got like Harry and Kirsty's friends with her, and at the beginning I decided actually I would quite like that you're asking lots and lots and lots of questions of this person. Tell me about your religion, tell me about what your family do, and there's a point in it where I thought actually Kirsty, go and ask the RE teacher, stop asking this lassie. Because I thought what's a better way to show people as well, like rather than asking questions of folk to do all the work. And I thought I can put these things in. I hope I did anyway. Mm-hmm. And I try to drip feed it all the way through so that by the time you get to the third part, it was important that there was a bigger message. And Harry also Disney escape getting things wrong as well with some of the things that she does. She has some moments where she makes quite classist comments because she's the middle class character in the book. But yeah, I spent a lot of time with the characters, I guess, over 16 years, just thinking, like, how do you bring it all together? What do you really want to say? There was so many topics that I visited, though. I had to pick out what was the most important. Does
that mean when you novelised it, you had to like take some things out almost? Oh,
there were so many stories that could have been in as well because I'd written it from Kirsty's point of view, and Kirsty's a really shite ally for queer people. But she gets better. But I thought, in the beginning, she's the first time she ever like finds out somebody she knows is gay. She's just like, oh my God, what would you do? How would you talk to them? And Charlene, who's horrible as well, is actually like, I'm putting the phone down on you. No, hen, you can, she got it. She's like, this is not okay. And I think sorry.
I think so. No, I'm interrupting you. I think that's like. Often when we have like working class characters in fiction or even like in the mainstream news, they're posited as like people who are fixed without any ability to learn or change. Mm-hmm. And also we think of the working class, in, again, mainstream news as almost predominantly white, which is why I think I love Duck Feet so much, because it's got like, it shows, the diversity of characters in working class communities, but also that like you said, no one's perfect, but we're all learning. We're all on this journey of like realizing where we're problematic and things we say that aren't right, and how we can learn and grow.
I think I lost my own stream of thought and went off on one. I think what I was trying to say was Kirsty was limited by her experiences. She wouldn't understand what like certain other characters in the book would be going through. She could only see it through a very white, cisgender, straight, like viewpoint. And I know people have said to me, why didn't you write from another person's point of view? And I thought, I'd be here for another 10 years, another 16 years, because there was things that I really, really wanted to tell that story, but she's the wrong person to be telling that story. Mm-hmm. She cannot, and like my publishers would say, oh, can you have more queer representation? And I'm like, in 2001 to 2007, there's people weren't out, and like she can't tell. There's lots of queer characters in Duck Feet. Don't know if you spotted them. There's loads. But I just thought, well, I'll write some spin-off stories and they can tell their own stories, but she can't do that.
So we're going to have some spin-off queer stories from Duck Feet. I love it. Jo, I'm just so aware that like we're running out of time already and we're going to have loads of questions from you guys. So Josie, I want to talk about the language in Deep Wheel Orcadia. It's as like lush and sumptuous as we've come to expect from your work. But what's really striking in the English translation, which people would have seen from your reading there, is the use of compound words. And even just in Astrid Docs, I think we've got like full active intimate. We've got lack slowly, and I think in that one as well we've got buddo to mean friend-child love. Can you talk us through that choice, or was it a choice, or was it simply that Orcadian expresses things in much more of a kind of wide way than the alternative English?
I think you'd find a similar effect in any language, or you could in any active translation, that one language never translates one to one into another. And I should say that compound word Trick. I stole that from Roddy Gorman, which is credited in the book, so I didn't come up with that either. But I was attracted to it as a use when I was trying to think about, if I want to translate this book, how can I do it without the English taking over, which is what would happen. If you give people a side-by-side translation and they're not familiar with the one language, they'll just read the English, and I wanted them to read the Orkney language. So I thought, well, I want to minoritize the English, and I want to put obstacles in it. I want people to trip up as they're reading it. I don't want the English to be a fluid reading experience. And the compound translations work partly as a kind of record of what I mean by these Orkney words and what I think these Orkney words mean, or the different things that they can mean. And they also work as these kind of obstacles in the English, or ways to stop English being fluid, being transparent. And the way that the English is set on the page, it's smaller, it's in a smaller type, it's at the bottom, it's laid out like prose, so it's very clearly like, this is the minor version, this is the version that you don't have to read. It's just there to help you if you want it. Yeah.
I think it does draw you back to the original, like it draws you back to the Orcadian if you're reading in English, but also it kind of draws attention to the fact that how we define words exactly is so personal, and also changes by like society and time and things like that as well. So I think it's just like expertly done. We've got a ton of questions from an online audience, so I'm going to ask you guys in the audience to put your hands up if you do have questions, just so I can get a kind of roving mic to you. But I'm going to start with the power of technology. Okay, this is a good open question. Will there be audiobooks of Duck Feet and Wheel Orcadia?
There's an email chain about it right now.
How about Duck Feet?
In my original contract, I said I would only sign it if I got an audiobook. The pandemic happened, but I think so. I think so.
And we've got Sophia B asks, if there are audiobooks, would you choose a celebrity to read them? If so, who would you choose and why?
Oh no, I'm reading my own stuff, come on.
The celebrity is you.
That's what the email chain's about. Not a celebrity. I have some questions about who I wanted to be read, and I'm kind of interested in the audiobook thing because I do want one, but there'll be stuff about how the text works that won't work in audio, and I'm kind of interested in the way that people want the audio because they understand the language better when they hear it, right? And that's one reason that people want the audio. I mean, that and we're very good readers as well. You know? And I'm interested in making people read it, which is what this translation thing is about as well. I want people to get used to reading Scots because if we don't, then we'll never have this language that we already have. Like it will go if we don't get used to reading and writing it. So I want that too. But yes, I want there to be an audiobook.
Do you feel when you write in like a language that's so personal to you, do you feel like a strong connection to performing it yourself? Or, I mean, is that why you feel like you want to perform it yourself? It wouldn't be right if someone else did it.
I think, I mean, people can have a go if they want. I don't know, especially with Duck Feet, I feel like I've just climbed right inside Kirsty's head and like, I don't know. I mean, with Vicky Romeo plus Jules, I can hear Vicky, but I find it very hard to maintain her voice. I would have to do a chapter at a time, and if somebody else wants to do it, then, you know, have at it. But with Duck Feet, I really, really want to do it myself because I don't know, I just feel like that close to it.
Yeah. How about you, Josie? Would you feel comfortable giving Orcadian over to someone else?
It's very complicated, and there's some, because the way that I speak is a bit mixed, and I cannot and don't want to offer like authenticity to a listenership or a readership. So I have confusion about that. I also have like voice is a thing that is like changing for me, and very much so in the last couple of years. And although I'm a performer and I always have read my work and I always will read my work, I feel some discomfort about having a permanent record being the thing at the moment. So these are questions that I'm chewing over right now with my publisher. So I don't know. I'm thinking about it.
See, writing's not easy, being a writer.
Yeah.
Do we have a question from the audience? Don't be shy, put your hand straight up if you have something for us. If not, we've got plenty more from the online. Oh, is that one there? Okay, well, I'll let you guys figure it out. We've got a question for Eli. Loved hearing about people's responses to your characters. What's your own relationship with your characters? Do they talk to you?
Constant stream of conversation. Without spoiling the ending for anybody who's not heard it, I did wonder at one point whether Charlene and Harpreet would ever... you know, I always thought Charlene maybe later on down the line would apologise and stuff, and I thought Harpreet would never accept that apology. But then one day I was like out on a jog and I suddenly like heard them talking, and I was really quite shocked that Harpreet was just like, yeah, you're a different person now, and I was like, whoa, that's, yeah. So I don't know, it's just constant chat.
So you've not let them go since you've brought the book out?
Well, that was a wee while ago, but yeah, I think I have. I think because I want to do spin-off stories, I'm waiting in new voices. There's a couple of characters. There's a character that you haven't met in Duck Feet who's there on the register, and I can't hear him yet. I've not been able to hear what his voice is.
I love the idea of writing as like a séance for you. Like you're waiting to see who comes through and then goes on the page. We have some more online questions. If you do have any, just go on. Let's go real. Let's go analog question.
Hiya.
Hello.
I'll take my mask off. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you, I think.
Brilliant. I have more questions about your futuristic rural Scots space idyll. And just sort of, you were talking about Ursula K. Le Guin and her kind of exploration and change through her writing life of how she portrayed what utopia is and colonialism and all blah, blah, blah. And you were sort of talking about Matthew Fitt as well. Just wondering about in other languages, I don't know, because you were talking about minoritized languages more generally, are there examples of these sorts of more, as we would think, unusual uses of the minority languages in genre, or, I mean, genre fiction? Is there that sort of sci-fi, fantasy, etc.? Gisela reading list.
I'll put one on. I'll put one on Twitter after, and I'm just thinking. So I would say that the area that I know of where that's most developed is in forms of Afrofuturism. And particularly Nalo Hopkinson is really interesting in that regard. And I'm just going to say here that the situations of European minority languages and diasporic minority languages and racialized minority languages are very different, and I'm not drawing a direct comparison. But I think there's work, there's Nalo Hopkinson's work, including as an editor around that, is really, really interesting. And there's novels there that are fantastic. There's also been a bit of a movement that I can't read of Welsh futurism in Welsh language that I'm really, really interested in. I know there's at least one Scottish Gaelic sci-fi novel as well. And I think what joins a lot of these is, as with Ursula K. Le Guin, there's a tendency towards very complex utopias, or towards interrogation of the idea of utopia itself as a problem or as a constraint. And that's something that comes up in Nalo Hopkinson's work in an interesting way, that the futures that we desire for ourselves are often what can shape and contain action in the present. Yeah.
How did you describe it before? Utopian tendencies. I think you said before. I like that as a phrase. Eli, have you got some writers who've inspired you in Scots?
Well, in Scots, Anne Donovan's Buddha Da, I loved it. And also Matt Fitzbert and Benny Nagogo. That was I really love reading anything in dialect. I love sopranos and stuff like that. And I find it quite easy, but I found that hard. It took me 4 chapters and then something clicked. And I was just there, Stursucker. How good is that? Stursucker is a brilliant one. Hoover, sci-fi Hoover. It's brilliant. Loved it.
You're going to be tested on these books, by the way. We've got one more question down here. If we can take the mic, and in the meantime, I'm just going to ask an online question. This is a good and potentially tough one to answer. Do you think developing a standard written form would be a good thing for Scots and Orcadian?
I don't know. I've decided that I don't have to answer that question because I'm not a Scots language activist, and that's not my job. I'm a writer. My job is to write interesting things. I think that standardization might make it easier to teach. I would love to see what would happen if I would love to live in a future where we don't have to teach in standardized languages and where literature isn't published in standardized languages. I think that would be a more plural, more linguistically meaty future, but I have no idea how to get there. I just write books. so I see the practical merits of it. I am resistant to it because language standardization has typically been a mechanism of colonization, of empire. They're the same thing, in fact, that's how empire happens, is through language standardization. So I have my own resistances to it, and so I resign the question to the people who are rightly trying to being activists for Scots language. I just write, and that's my job.
Are you also taking the fifth?
Pretty much that. I don't think I'm getting to add to that.
So it's a distinct, we're not answering. We've got an audience member there.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the malleability of these languages. I'm Irish, as you obviously can hear, even though I've been here for over 40 years. And I wanted to ask if you found when you were writing, both of you, that the language has changed because of incomers like the Irish, the Italians, and more recently, people from further afield, and whether you're able to reflect that. And also, of course, I'm fascinated by the impact of Scandinavia on Orkney and the language. And I loved your reply that language shouldn't be standard. But I just wondered if you found yourself reflecting that diversity in your writing.
Whew. I mean, every language is a layering of changes over centuries. And the Orkney language grew out of a Norse language. It was called Norn, Orkney Norn, which is, as in a language is effectively extinct, except it lives on in the Orkney variant of Scots. And that Orkney variant of Scots has bits of Gaelic in it, has bits of French in it, has bits of Germanic languages in it, has bits of, it's got also, and it will continue to change. And language is always in this continuous process of change. It becomes fraught when the idea of language changing becomes fraught only when there are political tensions, right, that enable it to be fraught. And so there's very specific things that in Orkney in particular is there has been a large kind of, first, a large migration of Scots speakers, right, to Orkney that changed the language from Norn to what is now Orkney Scots, and now a large migration of primarily English speakers to Orkney. So it's now a 50-50 population that has dramatically changed the language again. But because there are political and cultural tensions there, what is Orkney and what is English, even though the two languages are interpenetrating all the time and influencing each other, becomes a question of resources, of who has power, and there's all sorts of things that you can tease apart in that. And I think that specific local situation, that's going to be that's the same for every language, and so language becomes a tool and a weapon of both power and resistance to power.
Fantastic answer. Ely, did you spent a long while writing these stories. Did you feel Scots changing as you were writing them?
Do you know what? I think I went away and lived in England, came back and lived in Glasgow, and then came to Edinburgh, so I find myself a wee bit displaced. But I think I pretty much stayed true to what I'd written 16 years ago. The voices sounded to me, they sounded the same. So I think I was probably still back 16 years ago. I think the new stories that I wrote, the new chapters, were pretty tight. I mean, nobody said to me that there are bits that sound different, so I don't know that I did. I don't know that I did reflect that.
Do you feel a pressure to continue writing in Scots because of the way it inspires people, because of the issue of representation, to push back on the idea that Scots writing doesn't have the kind of universal appeal that English language writing does? Or is it something that you just couldn't express yourself in any other way?
I think that I like reading stuff in Scots better. Even when I've written stuff in English, it sounds like it now turns out I've been writing in Scots when I've actually thought I was writing in English, because I'll write things sometimes and the grammar check will pick up and it'll say, I'm not supposed to be writing that, I should be writing which. I've now discovered that that's a Scottish way of saying things, and I thought, I didn't know that. Just the way that I talk. So when I've been changing it, it's not sounded right. So I don't know, I do write things in English, and I do try and write things about different places that I go to, and I'll definitely will continue to write in Scots, but I think it's just whatever I hear. It's just what I listen to. That's what influences me.
It's the most natural thing in the world to do.
I like rhythmic things. It's the rhythm for me, and I like a lot of Irish writing as well because it feels really jaunty and I can hear it.
It's got the right beats and stuff.
Yeah.
How about you, Josie? Because I am aware that Deep Wheel Orcadia is the first novel written in Orcadian in, is it about half a century?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. There's not Orkney literature, the Orkney language literature is quite small, partly because of the influence of George Mackay-Brown and Edwin Muir not writing in Orkney language, and Edwin Muir taking a position against Scots. And we have these like very successful writers, very important and brilliant writers that and that means that we've got one of the smallest Scots language literatures. I'm not going to claim to be the first or the only at anything. the more, if there's pressure, it'll just make me not want to do it. Like, I'll be thrown about it. Like, but I've not felt that yet. I'll write whatever I want to write, and that'll certainly involve working with Orkney language, working with Scots, and working with English into the future. And also working with things that aren't language. I'll do whatever is interesting.
Yeah.
And representation can be damned. I'm not interested, and it can get to. Like, I'm done with it.
In the spirit of expanding perhaps to our online audience who may not have like read anything on Orcadian or Scots before, I think it'd be nice to give our audiences like one of your favourite words in Scots and Orcadian to go away with.
I'm going to give you a moment to think, Eli, because I'm just going to say that I refuse.
Oh, really?
No more coasters, no more tea towels, no more favourite words, no more individual best words ever. It's a language, so it exists in sentences and stories. Yeah.
I like that we've caught you on a rebellious day. You can also plead the fifth on that one as well.
I don't know that this is necessarily Scottish, or if it's like, I thought it was Renfrew, but then Graham Armstrong mentioned it in the Young Teen. I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss Pocket Muncher? I really wish that had been in there in my novel.
Pocket Muncher, never even heard that before.
Oh, do you know what a Pocket Muncher is?
No.
Oh my God, pocket munching is when you keep your sweeties or your crisps in your pocket in school and you slyly take them out. Now, it's acceptable to do if you're in a classroom because you're getting one over the teacher. But, oh my God, to be told that you're a pocket muncher, you don't want to be called a pocket muncher. That's really offensive. That means that you're sleeky and you're snidey and you don't share. Oh no, you wouldn't be friends with a pocket muncher.
Well, I feel like that's a good time to close this very wide-ranging discussion. I'm sure that like you can feel how much there is in these novels, although they are very different. They're doing like so much with the language. They're doing so much with ideas of identity, but also like society and who we are and who we want to be. And Josie's novel isn't out until October, but I believe you can pre-order it from the Book Festival's online shop, which is shop.edbookfest.co.uk. And Duck Feet is currently out. You can see it here, this gorgeous copy that I have. And you can get that from the online bookshop and also the bookshop in person. You can also get Josie's other books both online and in person too, I think. For our, I was going to say live person audience, everyone's live. To our in-person audience, you can catch these two brilliant writers at the signing tent in a couple of minutes. And if you're at home and you've enjoyed the event today and you want to donate to the book festival to help them continue to do what they do in a more accessible way, you can do so. There should be a donate button somewhere around, very obvious. Please do so if you would like to. But I just want to say a huge thank you to the book festival, to the Edinburgh College of Art, to our brilliant in-person, live person audience, to our brilliant online audience, and also to these two fantastic writers, Josie and Eli.